Welcome to APS EdTech Bytes. This is bite-sized tech for big ideas. And today we are talking about podcasting. Some things to know before I get started. This session is being recorded. This is webinar style, so please hold your questions until the end. And the recording and applicable resources will be shared with you via email and on our website after the session. So to get started, I am going to take you into my presentation about podcasting. But I'm also going to get into the podcast software and just show you. So Adobe podcasting is where we are going to be today. When we are signing in, I'm going to tell you this before we get started, just in case. When you are signing in to podcast.adobe.com, you're going to continue with Google because we have free premium accounts in APS. And you're going to click company or school account. It's going to have an orange pie chart just like this. And then the last thing, if you've never logged into Adobe Express before, is you must click Albuquerque Public Schools. Again, it's an orange dot. So you're going to click continue with Google, orange dot, orange dot. That's just to make sure that you have your premium account that is purchased through APS. You don't have to pay for anything. You shouldn't be on a personal account. All of this is given to you by APS. You just need to make sure that you log in, continue with Google, company or school account, Albuquerque Public Schools. Do not click APS. Now, once you're in there, it's going to look like this. It is a very simple platform to use, and so it is very simple in the amount of tools that we have. So we have 3 tools that you can use within the podcasting studio. Enhanced speech is the first one. This button from here is going to allow you to remove background noise and some of the static from previously recorded audio. So if you recorded something on your phone or on your laptop or on a Chromebook, something like that, and then you bring it in here, you can use that enhanced speech button to remove all of that background noise from something that was already recorded. I'm going to skip the studio for a hot second, and I'm going to come over here to mic check. This is a great tool if you are using an external microphone. If you are just using your built-in microphone, you will probably be fine. And we do not recommend you using it on student Chromebooks. There's just no reason for them to do a mic check since they really can't do anything about it if the levels are off. For them, it's more of a trial and error situation. Most of the time, it's just fine with the tips and tricks that I'm going to tell you along the way. And the last thing we have here is the actual studio button. This is how we get into the recording studio and we can actually start recording our podcast. So again, enhanced speech, previously recorded audio can be enhanced. The mic check, not necessary for student Chromebooks, and then inside the studio. So I'm going to go ahead and just log into Adobe Podcast so that you can actually see everything that I'm doing. So I've already logged in. I'm here on the platform. I'm going to scroll down to my tools and I'm going to go straight into the studio because this is where you're going to spend all your time. Once I'm in here, it shows me how many minutes I've already recorded. I can start a new project from there, which is what you will probably do. And then if you scroll down, you're going to see all previously recorded podcasts in your account. So you don't need to record and download and it's gone forever. It stays inside of Adobe Podcast, and then you can come back to it if you need, continue recording, maybe do your editing, download, whatever you need to do. But we are going to start a new project. We are now inside the recording studio. So I'm just going to point everything out to you and then show you how some of it works. We have our home button. That'll take you back to the home page of Adobe Podcast. Here is our title. It automatically does untitled and then the date. But if I just click on it, I can change it to Podcast Party, or whatever the name of your project is. You have your undo button and redo button. So if you mess up along the way in your editing, you can always undo or redo if you deleted something you weren't supposed to. We have an upload button. If you recorded audio outside on your cell phone, on the Chromebook, on a laptop, with some other sort of fancy recording software that you might have, you can bring it in to be part of your podcast. This would be great if you have students collaborating on a podcast, but they don't need to be sitting with each other or speaking to each other to do the podcast. You can have one student record their audio, download it, send it to student 2, and that student can then upload it into one podcast and have multiple pieces of audio. Then we have our music button. We will get into that in just a minute. But in here, you have all of these different tiles that give you different genres, different themes of music that you can use within your podcast. And we'll go into that a little bit more in a minute. We have a placeholder button. This is great for if you need to do additional research before you can talk about a certain part of your project. Maybe you are doing a project with someone else and you want to just put in a placeholder for their audio to be put in later. This is a nice way to just remind yourself of what's going on. And you can also add a description so that you don't forget why you put that placeholder there. So get interview from John, and then I can put that in later. It just holds the place of something I want to put in later. And then at the bottom here, we have the filters. Right now, it is just the enhanced speech button. We do want to turn it on because oftentimes when you're using this in a classroom, there's a lot of students, a lot of background noise, the heater's going off, a class is walking by, the class next door is watching a movie. All of these different sounds that you can hear will get picked up by a microphone. So if we turn on the enhanced speech, it's going to reduce a lot of that background noise from being in the podcast. So we always recommend that you turn this on for whenever students are going to be recording. As a teacher, you probably don't need it all the time. So it's kind of, at your discretion, turn it on. Let me go ahead and delete this guy so that we can get back to a clean slate. You'll see that right in the middle, we have the start recording button, and it also highlights that recording dot in the bottom left corner of your screen. You can invite guests to record. If you are doing this with students, this might not be your best option. It kind of just depends on your situation because the invite guests feature has guests speaking through the internet, not within one project. So it's not like me and my partner that are recording can sit next to each other and record on the same device. I'm recording on my device, they're recording on their device into one podcast. So if they're in the same room, you're going to hear a lot of the reverb going on. You're going to hear some echoing going on. So unless you have a space like a breakout room or some like different classes going on, this probably won't be as helpful to you as you want it to be. And then we have that upload audio button that we'll show you on the left side. Down across the bottom, the record button, we have the playback so you can listen back to what you recorded. We have our timeline across the bottom that'll tell us how long our podcast is and how far into it we are listening. Our microphone is just to mute. And the last one is the settings gear, and that just lets me choose which microphone I want to use. Students probably won't have a choice unless maybe they have headphones with a speaker or with a microphone. But if they don't have that, then they won't need to change their microphone. And then across the top, here is my bubble indicating that I'm the only one in this podcast right now. If I had a guest on my podcast, then I would have a second bubble with either their picture or their initials, depending on how they have theirs set up. This invite guest feature, like I was telling you, this is what it looks like when people are talking. This is what the guest sees. The guest can't do a whole lot of anything except be a guest on a podcast. You can create a link and share it with others so that they can be on your podcast. But again, this doesn't work great within the same classroom or within the same setting. Then we have our download button, which has a bunch of features in here, or a bunch of options, I guess is a better way of saying it. You can download the audio in a couple of different formats. You can also download a transcript in a few different formats. And then you can download the original recordings. If you have multiple people, you can download their recordings individually as opposed to one big podcast. You may or may not want that. And then last is share. This is a little bit misleading. It looks like a student can share this to their teacher, but really this is more of a teacher function where you can make a template or an outline of a podcast, and then you can click this create template button and send it to students, and they can just fill in the blanks of their podcast. Probably better for younger students who maybe don't know what to do, or older students if you want a very specific flow to the podcast. So those are all of the basic tools. Now let me get in there and actually record a little something so you can see how easy it is to actually do stuff in your podcast. So I'm going to record a snippet and I'm going to do some editing. I'm going to mess up intentionally so that you can see what the editing tools can do. Hey, this is Christina with APS EdTech, and today we are checking out podcasting with Adobe Podcast. One of my favorite features within Adobe Podcast is all of the editing features. The editing tools that exist within this platform are top notch and so easy to use. Your students are going to get a kick out of this. All right, so there was my recording, and you'll see now that it's got this little spinning wheel over here. That's because it's working to transcribe my speech. So everything that I've said, it is now using its AI features to transcribe it into text. There we go. And now I can take a look at it. So I've got my podcast here. You'll see a couple of things. First, I've got this dot here. Those dots indicate a long pause or an or an And what's really great about this is, well, let's listen so you can actually hear what that sounds like.
Hey, this is Christina with.
So we had a solid 2 seconds where I didn't say anything, and that's what that dot indicates. So if I want to cut that out and I need my talking to start right away, I can click on that dot and just backspace on my keyboard. And now it has actually cut that audio, those 2 seconds of dead audio where I didn't say anything, it cut it out. I didn't have to go and snip it exactly where it was and kind of figure out exactly where I needed to cut it. I just click on the dot, backspace. So now let's hear it from 0. You'll see here on my timeline, we're at 0. So let's listen to it from there.
Hey, this is Christina.
So my talking starts right away. Next thing you're going to see is that my name is spelled wrong. Well, because, the computer doesn't know that I spell my name weird for Christina, but I can click on my name here. I can come over to the side where I have this pencil and I can correct transcript. So now I can go in here, and I'm the only one that really cares that my name is spelled wrong. So I can fix it. All good to go. Anytime I make changes to the text, the only thing it can do is remove the audio. It will not change my audio. So I can't write instead of my name, Christina, I can't write someone else's name like Kelly and change my audio to say, hey, this is Kelly, because that's not what I said. But if I delete the word Christina, it will delete that part of the audio. So now I'm going to come over here, and I said EdTech, and I said APS EdTech. This heard Apps Editor Tech. So let me fix that real quick. APS Ed Whoops. Got to save it. APS. Save. Correct this. Ed. Done. All right. So then you heard me mess up. So let's keep listening.
EdTech, and today we are checking out podcasting with Adobe Podcast. One of my favorite features within
So instead of stopping my recording, going, oh, stopping the recording, deleting it, and starting completely over, I'm just going to highlight the part where I messed up. One of the right? All of that was where I messed up, that I don't actually need that part because all I did was stop, pause, take a breath, restart my sentence correctly. So now I can grab this part that I did wrong and I can just trash it. Now that part of the podcast, gone.
podcast. One of my favorite features within Adobe Podcast is one of my favorite features.
So you see, I messed up again. So again, instead of stopping my recording and restarting, I'm just going to highlight this piece where I messed up, backspace on my keyboard or the little trash can on the side panel, and it's gone from my podcast. So those are two things you can do. You can delete text, which will delete the audio. You can also edit the transcript that exists right in there. Now, say I'm kind of in between two pieces of a podcast. So I have the editing tools that exist within the platform are top-notch and so easy to use. Your students are going to get a kick out of this. Maybe I actually need a little bit more audio in between. So I can come up here to the last thing I want in that piece of recording, and I can continue recording. We have some of the best and easiest tools to use for editing. You can add music. You can delete parts of the audio by simply deleting parts of the transcript. You can change the transcript. And then when you're all done, you simply download and send to teacher. It is that simple. So you'll see now that I had that piece of audio. Then I put my cursor on the word use because that's the last part of the audio that I want. I clicked record again, and now it's putting that audio in between my two pieces. So this is really like editing software made simple. So now I've got all of that in there. It's looking great. I could keep talking forever, but 45 seconds is plenty for you to listen to me right now. So let's get into some of the other things we can do. Let's give some music. So this Your Music feature is brand new. I haven't even seen it yet, which is pretty cool. But all of these tiles are different collections of music. So I'm going to come down here, and this one looks kind of fun. Feels like the vibe of my podcasting podcast. Once I get in there, I have intros, I have outros, I have transitions, and I have background music. All of these are the same style of music. You'll notice that some are longer. So this is a 14-second intro. This is an 8-second intro. Same thing with outros. We have a long and a short of everything. You can preview it with the play button. And I like the vibe, but it's too long. So I'm going to pick the short one, and I can add it to my podcast with the plus button there. Now, wherever my cursor was is where it's going to throw it in. So be mindful of that. But if you do mess up like I just did, it's like right in the middle of everything. I can just hover over the end and I get these dots. And now I can move it up here. And now it is an intro to my podcast. If this is too long, and you'll notice that here at the end, this has quite a few seconds of dead space or dead audio. I can come here, I can go to my gears, and I can split it. So I can actually cut off that end, and then I can click on this piece and remove, if it'll let me. Why won't it let me? Okay, I'll go to the gears and delete. There we go. Some other things you can do in these little gears here is I can fade it in so you don't want that music to start abruptly and kind of scare your audience. Or maybe you want it to kind of fade out and kind of ease into your talking. You can do both of those things. You can also set it as background music. It's really, really good about creating background music. So it really drops the level of that music so that it's not trying to compete with your voice in the podcast. We don't want people to strain to hear your podcast. We want people to clearly hear your voice and then just add a little something with that background. And that's what that button does. Does a great job. You don't have to change the levels of anything. You can transcribe if there are words. This is just music, so it doesn't have any words. And of course, delete. So let's listen to what we've got on my podcast so far.
Hey, this is Christina with APS EdTech, and today.
So it was really nice about having an intro and then easing. I cut off some of that dead nothingness and then easing into my podcast, my actual talking. All right. So now that I've got that, I'm going to go ahead and come back down. I'm going to find that music again, and I'm going to give it a little transition. I want it here at the end though. So let's put the music and my little cassette. I want a transition piece. So let's just add in that one. And come down here. Now that's going to transition into my next part of the podcast. And then I can just start recording after that. So it really is that simple. Then maybe I want to put in my placeholder to remind me to get the interview from Sarah. She's going to send me her interview and I'll stick it in here later. That's it. That's all the stuff you need to know to be able to do your podcast. So you recorded, you were able to edit by changing the transcript. We added in some music. We used that placeholder. We learned how to do some editing to the music. Now, what you would have students do would be to download. And this is where all of those different settings are going to come into play. So you can do an MP3 or a WAV file. Probably MP3 is fine for your students. And then you can just download that. The transcript you can get in a few different ways. I would recommend a doc, a Google Doc, easy to edit. And I know that some teachers want the text so that the transcript, so that they can actually read through it and see some of the facts or maybe check things. And some teachers just want the final product, which is the podcast. So you can download parts of it. You can download all of it. It's kind of up to you and what you want your students to turn into you. And then down here, the original recordings. So that'll be all the separate pieces. And the thing you need to know about making a podcast. So if you need any additional support, please reach out to edtech@aps.edu, or you can find us on Let's Talk. And we would be glad to come out and do this with you and your students. I've done it with as young as 3rd grade, all the way up to high school seniors. It's easy and it's a fun project, something a little bit different that students aren't used to. All right. Have a good one. Thank you.